Here we are going to discuss macroeconomics and the demand side. So before going to the demand side, we have to first clarify the concept of macroeconomics. What does really macroeconomics means? Macroeconomics, macro literally means big or large size. So when we associated with economics, the term macro, then it means economics as a whole, for the nation as a whole, not the economics of a particular firm or industry or particular group of people, particular region. It is rather for the nation as a whole, that is national income, national employment, national savings, national investment, that is macroeconomics. Now, when it came to gain more and more importance, that was because of Keynesian theory of income, output, and employment. Now, when the Keynes came into light, when he highlighted his personality, it was highlighted during the Great Depression of 1930s. Earlier what happened, that the supply side economics was given more importance because of the classical economists, because according to them supply creates its own demand. So where everything is okay in supply, demand will be okay, but that proved wrong in the Great Depression of 1930s. From this we have one more point to be noted, and that is this, that when we talk of this demand, right, so this is aggregate demand, understand, because in macroeconomics it is aggregate demand and in microeconomics it is individual demand or market demand, but in macroeconomics demand of the nation as a whole. So this is your aggregate demand in macroeconomics. So, how the aggregate demand can affect the economy in the long run as well as in the short run. This can changes can be made through either monetary policy or fiscal policy, right? This is your monetary policy or fiscal policy. So, what is monetary policy? Monetary policy means either expansion of money supply or contraction of money supply in the economy through banking instruments. Now, there are various banking instruments, qualitative control as well as quantitative control. But here I would like to find main such factors which may affect aggregate demand in the economy and thereby affecting the uh, economic activities in the economy and controlling any kind of disparity or disequilibrium. So as pointed out earlier in the previous slideshow, I have taken the point that during the Great Depression of 1930s, the classical economist theory failed, which says that it was the supply side economics which is the main determining factor for the restoration of the economic stability. But Keynes found out that during the Great Depression of 1930s, it was the demand side economics which needs to be corrected, and that is aggregate demand. Aggregate demand was so less that the producers were bound to shut the factory and the people were rendered unemployed. So it was a very alarming situation which could be corrected through Keynesian macroeconomic policy, which mainly insists that demand side is the more important factor than the supply side. And he also pointed out that if the aggregate demand could increase in this depression period, then this depression would not linger for long. It will go away. It will not go at once, but it will take time, because when the aggregate demand will increase, producers will be uh, producers will have the incentive to produce more and more, and workers will get employment, and then this situation of depression will be rooted out through the stages, not at once, but it will take time, because production itself takes time, and workers are employed, their purchasing power will increase, commodities, I mean goods and services in the economy will be in huge quantity, and workers will have money in their pocket through their salaries, wages, or other kind of compensation which they get, which they are paid, which they are compensated for their work in the factories, companies, while producing goods and services. Impact of monetary and physical policy upon this aggregate demand, right? How it affects the aggregate demand. As far as monetary policy is concerned, we can lower the rate of interest in order to increase the money supply and hence increase aggregate spending, or in other words aggregate demand. So government holds the money supply in the economy. Actually, it is in the control of the central bank of the country, as in our case, in our India, it is the Reserve Bank which controls the money supply in the economy, but it works on behalf of the government. So if the government requires that there should be more spending, more aggregate demand, if the situation is that of on the verge of depression or recession, that the factories are not producing more because the aggregate demand is low, then what the government can do via monetary policy, it can ask the central bank to lower the interest rate, right? And interest rate will be lowered for the investment borrowers or other consumption borrowing. In this figure, I just want to let you know that aggregate demand also slopes downwards from left to right. As you know that individual demand curve also slopes downwards from left to right. But the reasons here are different. I mean, here sloping downwards from left to right of aggregate demand carries different reasons than that of individual demand curve in case of microeconomics. Here I have shown price level. First thing you see, on the y-axis we are showing price level, not simply the price of any particular commodity X. And on the x-axis we are showing GDPR, that is gross domestic product in real terms, real GDP, and this curve is aggregate demand, not the individual demand. So even the labeling of x-axis and y-axis is different, and the curve symbol, curve's name is also different. So it carries the different reasons than that carried by the individual demand curve in case of microeconomics. So here the reasons are different. Here the main reason is first of all, that is the rate of interest. Understand? If the rate of interest is low, then what will happen? Then there will be more money flowing in the economy, and the purchasing capacity overall of the economy will increase. Now, when we say aggregate demand, it does not only includes the consumer demand, consumption demand, it also includes investment demand. It also includes government demand. Why government demand? It demands for public goods and services. So first of all, aggregate demand is not only the total demand of all the consumers in the economy. Besides consumption demand of the ordinary consumers, it also includes the demand of government for public goods, demand of the investors for capital goods, then it becomes the aggregate demand. So obviously the reasons will also be different, not the simple reasons as in case of microeconomics individual demand curve. Here the rate of interest is one of the most important reason that why aggregate demand curve slopes downwards from left to right. If the rate of interest is lowered, then what will happen? People will have easy access to more money. Investors will have easy access for more lending. Understand? And so what will it result? More production, more employment, more income, and hence more aggregate demand. The second reason is that is also not less important, and that is the net exports, increasing or decreasing of net exports. Why? What does net exports means? That is exports minus imports. What happens when the price level, suppose the price level in the domestic market goes up, then what will happen? That foreign goods and services will competitively become cheaper than the domestic goods, and there will be more demand for foreign goods, and more demand for foreign goods means more demand for imports. Understand? And for other countries, what will happen? For other countries, imports means our exports, they will not show interest. Why? Because our domestic price have gone up, so we will be willing to sell them only at a higher price. So what will happen? Our exports will decrease and imports will increase. So the net exports will also will decrease. Understand? That is also another reason for why aggregate demand slopes downwards from left to right. Then the third reason is open market operations. Open market operations means when the government sells securities to the central bank of the country, I mean banks purchases the government securities, then what will happen? That so much money from the market will wipe away, and there will be less money in the economy spent on goods and services. On the contrary, if the government purchases securities, then it means that government security paper goes to the government, and the money, more and more money flowing in the economy, and so there will be more and more aggregate demand. So the reasons here are different other than that of the individual demand curve. That's why I have drawn this figure also along with the previous explanations. Otherwise, it's a simple demand curve, aggregate demand curve. I mean same shape, same x-axis, same y-axis. I mean same downward sloping uh, demand curve from left to right. The only difference is that it is aggregate demand. and on y-axis, in place of just price, I have labeled it price level, general price level, not the price of a particular commodity. Similarly, on x-axis, I have shown gross domestic product in real terms and not simply the demand for a particular good or service. And that's it.